So I'm now back from the Pokemon Oceania International Championships, and like I promised, I thought I'd give you guys a brief report on how my time there went, which was actually a bit weird overall. I ended up really enjoying it, but not for the reasons that I'd kind of expected. So I actually did enter into the competition. I was kind of worried that I wouldn't be able to get a spot, but hey, I actually did manage to. And it does cost quite a bit, but I feel like you kind of pay for the experience more than just the actual battles. Like, actually being at one of these events is, in a way, its own reward, and is definitely worth the trip down. Seriously, if anyone watching this ends up living near an area where they hold one of these, definitely try and go. It is an amazing experience, one that you will not forget, and yeah, 2014 Australian Nationals, I absolutely love that, so I was keen to get to this one, if only for that. So I wasn't really sure how I'd go, I just kinda wanted to have some fun matches and try and do as well as I did. At 2014 I ended up with a 5-4 win-loss record for the day, which was actually fairly impressive seeing as 1, it was my first Nationals, and 2, I was extremely tired by the end of that because we went into very late into the day. So, how did I do this time? Well, firstly, I think I'll just give an overview of my team. I used mainly an electric terrain kind of team because that was the style that most leapt out to me when I was just testing out random Pokemon in the battle tree. So, I've got my Tapu Koko here, which is actually a mixed attacker because I felt that it'd surprise people who EV'd their Pokemon to survive specifically special spreads. It did okay. Really, I feel from this, you don't really use Tapu Koko for its offensive power. You use it for its terrain and for its speed. It's more there to pick off weakened opponents than to actually one-hit KO stuff. The second member of this crew is Xurkitree, with a, well, somewhat of a standard moveset. I have Energy Ball here because I couldn't really be bothered to reset for Hidden Power Ice, but the other thing is, Hidden Power Ice really is only for Garchomp. Energy Ball hits most other threatening ground types like Gastrodon and Crocodile harder than Hidden Power Ice would, and I already had answers to Garchomp on other Pokemon of my team, so I felt that it wasn't really necessary. Anyway, this one's a simple Timid with max special attack and max speed. It was originally designed as a Choice Scarfer, and that's how I used it in the battle tree, but I decided that I would use a specific Pokemon on my team that would actually mean that I would not need the Choice Scarf. I'd get the same speed, well actually even more speed, but I'd still retain the freedom to switch moves. This other Pokemon is not the next member of my team, Celesteela, who's a pretty standard defensive Celesteela, but I've got Wide Guard there, which is actually the main reason why I used it. That and having an Earthquake immunity. One cool thing that I found out about Wild Guard while testing, and I'm very glad I did and not during the actual tournament, is that if you use Wide Guard, you'll block your own discharges from hitting your partner. So, I didn't know that originally until I tested that, and that was pretty useful since I use a lot of discharge on this team, and of course I don't want to be hitting my own Celesteela with that. And now here she is. This Pokemon here, Whimsicott, was kind of the real star of this team in a lot of ways. I found a random set suggestion, and I read into the way that Nature Power works and found it to be quite interesting. Basically, Nature Power gets the priority boost from Prankster despite turning into an offensive move the moment it's used. Normally it turns into Tri-Attack, which is very underwhelming, but if a terrain is active, it'll match the terrain. So in electric terrain it'll become Thunderbolt, in misty terrain it'll become Moonblast, etc. Given how often terrain is used in this format, that is actually pretty cool. You'll always have a pretty decent move available to you at priority. The one thing that's an issue though is Dark types are in fact immune to this. I tested this out in an Alolan Muck just so I wouldn't find out the hard way in the tournament. Yes, in fact they are. But the really cool thing here is that by equipping a Normalium Z, you have access to several different potential Z moves for a variety of different situations. And having access to a priority Z move is actually pretty awesome. For the most part, this equates to pulling off a surprise Gigavolt Havoc to KO something, but if my opponent's making use of terrain, I can do some interesting things with this too. Oh right, and also Tailwind and Encore, two great moves for Whimsicott. Tailwind is also the other cornerstone of this team. In fact, it means that Circuitry can function pretty effectively even without the electric terrain. I effectively have a Choice Scarf Circuitry that is not locked into any of its moves, and that's something that's pretty cool to have. Next I have Arcanine. I heard Arcanine was good in this format, and I'd never actually used an Arcanine before, so I thought, you know, might as well. What I didn't realise is that Arcanine was not only good in this format, it's literally the single most used Pokemon in this current format. Which, if I'd known that at the time, I might not have brought it. But yeah, 75% of the top cut teams this tournament used Arcanine on them. That's pretty considerable. Thing is though, I'm actually more okay with this than I am with things like Kangaskhan or Landorus Therian in earlier formats, because unlike those two, Arcanine is actually very versatile. Sure, I saw a lot of Arcanines in the final matches, but I don't think I ever saw the same Arcanine twice. They have a pretty wide move pool, and their stats let them do a lot of different things. They can go for bulky, they can go for all-out offensive, for movesets they can go physical, special, mixed, support with Will-O-Wisp and Snarl. I've seen Roar to counter Trick Room, I've even seen Bulldoze. They've got a lot of really cool options, and I like how versatile of a Pokemon this is. My one is a variation on a standard set with not that much speed, but a bit more bulk, but the main surprise that I put in here is Helping Hand. I like having at least one Helping Hand user on any doubles team I make. Sometimes that move can be the difference between winning or losing a match, and if you make the right call, it can actually really swing things in your favour. So I was glad to have something with the move on my team. I felt with the sheer abundance of Tapu Leles in this format, I wouldn't really need extreme speed all that much, and turned out I was right. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen an Arcanine use extreme speed in any of the finals matches that I've watched, so yeah, that says something. Last is Crocodile, yet another one of these standard Pokemon but in an unexpected way that I have on my team. This thing was kinda interesting. Very few people that I faced expected my Crocodile to be this fast, and it really threw them off. This Crocodile was actually designed to be a Choice Scarfer, but again I realised, oh hey, I can use Tailwind and not even need to do that. The main idea is to come in as a revenge killer and pick off a few weakened opponents and grab yourself some Moxie boosts. Yes, I am using Moxie and not Intimidate. At one point I kinda regretted this, and I was actually considering the night before I do have a second Sandile bred up with Intimidate, so I was actually considering training that one up instead. I'm kinda glad I didn't, because Moxie proved to be useful to me in quite a few situations, which I'll explain once I get to the actual matches. Oh yeah, the Groundium Z helps for the same reasons it does on Garchomp, having a strong single target ground move, and Taunt was there mainly to catch Trick Room teams, although in practice that never really helped much. So, I fly down to Melbourne, and still, I love the city. Melbourne is a great city. If I could, I would live there and not in Sydney, because not that I hate Sydney, but I like Melbourne much, much more. Just the public transport, it's so convenient to get around everywhere. To give you an example, on one of my days when I came back from the tournament venue, I got asked for directions by a random person, because the law of that is you always get asked for directions in places that you're not native to. So, despite the fact that I've only ever been in Melbourne for 6 days in my whole life, 2 separate trips down there, I was able to give this person directions. Melbourne is just that easy to get around in. Seriously, those trams are amazing. But anyway, got down to Melbourne, got back to the hotel, everything seemed fine. I was able to get to the venue on time for the pre-check-in, which surprisingly, there was no queue. I was worried there'd be an enormous queue, but there wasn't. So already +1 point compared to 2014, where I was up at 6 AM outside the venue in a gigantic line. And even then, the tournament itself didn't end up starting until 12. Eesh. So I really like this registration the day before the actual event thing. Anyway, I go there. I also get some nice goodies for participating. I get a cap and some card sleeves and a pin, which are probably all going to be quite valuable, seeing as they're literally exclusive to this one event. So anyway, that's all done. I get back to the hotel, and everything seems fine, except that night, when I'm trying to sleep for the big day tomorrow. Night before the tournament, I suddenly come down with an enormous headache. Like one of the worst headaches I've had in my entire life. At first I thought this was brought on by a combination of sinus issues from having 3 colds over the past 3 weeks and the plane trip. But yeah, that wasn't a good sign, and I had to get Panadol at like 1 AM in the morning, so I was worried because I'd be going into this on not that much sleep. So I wake up in the morning, the headache is mostly gone, I'm thinking, yes, this is fine, it's okay, and then I start to feel a very slight hint of a sore throat. And at this point I'm thinking, oh no, please don't tell me that I've got my 4th sickness in 4 consecutive weeks. The day of the tournament, because if I did, that would be insane. So I spent the morning having breakfast, going in on the tram to the venue, desperately trying to convince myself that I wasn't sick. I was just like, please, please, please don't be sick, please don't be sick, please don't be sick. I get there, I see the pairings listed, which thankfully there's a QR app that you can actually get. You scan the QR code on the wall and you immediately get your tournament pairings for the rounds. Again, great improvement over the last tournaments that I've been to. But yes, as it comes time for my first match, I start to realize, yep, I'm probably sick. And I felt really bad about this, because normally I hate going to major events while I'm sick. I just feel so awful possibly giving other people my illness. Like, I just feel just really, really, really terrible about that. It makes me feel so selfish just staying at an event like that for me and risking other people getting my illness. The thing is, this is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime thing. They very rarely bring a major international competition to Australia, so I kind of felt, you know what, I'm gonna stay here as much as I can. So I'll just get this out of the way now, just so that people aren't disappointed later. Eventually, I did have to drop out of the tournament, because by about halfway through the day, I started to feel like this, I don't think I'll be able to handle the whole day all the way until like 8:40 PM. So I felt that it was best for my health that I drop out. I asked the tournament staff if I'd still be able to compete on day 2 if I dropped out and got losses for all the rest of the days on day 1, and they said day 2 was for the top 64 anyway, so if I was to get losses for all the rest of the day's matches, I would not be able to compete in day 2 regardless, so dropping out of the whole thing was my only option, sadly. Really, I just wanted to have some more fun matches the second day, but yep, that was not to be. But enough about that, let's go to the actual matches themselves. So, round 1 I was actually up quite high on the tables, like number 6 or something like that. So, okay, I was really terrified at first, because when I scanned through the list of people who'd registered online the night before, to see if there was anyone that I recognized, I saw the name Wolfglick there, and I was like, uh-oh. Yeah. I felt that with my luck, there was a very high chance I got paired up against him in round 1. I was also thinking, okay, hey, at least Aaron Zhang's not here. The next day I check, and Aaron Zhang is there, so it was like, right. I did not get paired with either of them on round 1. I actually got paired with someone from, I think, from China. I was really hoping to get at least one Japanese person, so I could surprise them by speaking Japanese to them. But, sadly, that didn't actually happen. Anyway, first round, well, it was a total massacre. They had a Trick Room team, and I got completely destroyed. It was like Porygon 2, a Alolan Marowak, bunch of stuff that totally wrecks you if you can't disrupt their Trick Room. First game, I was unable to do that, and like, I totally saw the Trick Room coming, I just couldn't really stop it, and completely wiped. Second game, I at least tried to Encore the Trick Room with Whimsicott, but even that wasn't really enough, and I still got totally destroyed. So that was a clean sweep by my opponent in that game. Not a good way to start. What really annoyed me was that I actually had a Mudsdale that was specifically designed to underspeed any Marowak in Trick Room, that I originally wanted to include instead of Crocodile as kind of like a Trick Room tech. I chose not to because I didn't actually fight very many Trick Room teams in practice. Oh, how wrong I was. Or at least I thought at the time. Anyway, I did at least get to say hi to Wolfglick and Aaron Zhang, so that was cool. But game 2, I go down into the much, much lower tables. Like, as in the hundreds. So yeah, that was a big drop. And people there were saying things like that it's generally on these tables that you start to see the more fun teams. and the one I was up against was quite interesting. They led with a Alolan Dugtrio and Arcanine. Alolan Dugtrio being a Pokemon that I never expected to see here at all. So, what happens? Well, I noticed the Arcanine doesn't intimidate me. And I'm like, okay then, so it must be Flash Fire? Then on their turn, Alolan Dugtrio uses Beat Up. Huh, I forgot that Dugtrio could get that. Wait, why is it targeting its partner? What? Oh, Arcanine gets Justified! Yeah, so that was interesting. Arcanine is now at a +4 boost. You normally think of Justified as being on Lucario and Terrakion, but yeah, Arcanine gets it too. I remembered that, but yeah, it hit me a little bit too late. So I'm now very scared because there's this Arcanine here sitting at +4, and I know that it has extreme speed, so yeah, that worries me a lot. I need to get rid of this thing quickly. Thing is, a combination of it for some reason not wanting to use extreme speed on me, and my Whimsicott having access to priority nature power, I was able to eliminate it before it could be a problem, and with that out of the way, my opponent did try to pull another interesting move by having a Mismagius with Perish Song, but by that point it was a little too late for them, and I was able to take game 1. Though the match ended kinda interestingly, it was just my Xurkitree, I believe, against their Cloyster, and if their Cloyster was Scarfed, which some are, I probably would have lost there because I no longer had Tailwind, but it was not, and thus Zap, gone. Second game also went pretty cleanly one-sidedly in my favour, and at the very end, they were down to just a Alolan Dugtrio while I had both Whimsicott and Crocodile out. I could have ended the match in a very trollish way. I had him Encored into Protect, so he was pretty much done. But you might remember that my Crocodile has Taunt. He'd actually been reduced to 1 HP due to a Focus Sash, so I was thinking that I could actually taunt him and thus force him into struggling himself to death, which would have been hilarious, but he pulled off a double protect and blocked my taunt, so in the end I was just like, I'll just go for the consistent safe win and just finish it. So that was good. From a clean sweep against me in game 1, I did a clean sweep in game 2. So that put me even. Game 3, I got to the sort of, I guess, middle-ish tables, and this was one where things got kind of interesting. I feel like after rounds 1 and 2, you're starting to get to the point where you're fighting against people who are more evenly matched with your skill level. I noticed that a lot of people that I knew had their round 3 matches go into 3 games, because yes, these are best of 3 by the way, and I was no exception. I lost game 1 thanks to an annoying Aerodactyl with Skydrop that I totally saw what he was doing, but because of how fast he was and that I'd not had Tailwind up, he was able to constantly keep my Xurkitree out of the action and unable to KO him, and that just went really, really badly very quickly. Not helped by the fact that my Celesteela pretty much just stood there and did pretty much nothing throughout most of the match because I was just having to Wide Guard all the time to protect Xurkitree from Garchomp. Not that great. But I was able to win game 2, though unfortunately I actually forget how. So we go into game 3, and it actually is very, very close, and I'm actually a bit annoyed at myself about this. I did lose game 3, so that put me at 1 win, 2 losses overall. But there was one turn where I feel like if I had done things differently, I easily could have had the win. And I feel kind of annoyed because I think I was totally responsible for my own loss here. I pretty much threw the game away. So what happened on this turn was that my opponent had a low HP paralyzed Tapu Lele from an earlier weird gambit that I did when I discharged with Xurkitree knowing that my own Whimsicott would get hit. I was thinking in my head, okay, when I'm doing this, I know I'm going to paralyze myself. I mean, of course I'm going to paralyze myself. How could I not? And yeah, I paralyzed myself. That actually didn't do much because Whimsicott's entire moveset's priority anyway, and I was never fully paralyzed, so it actually wasn't that bad, but I was able to paralyze Tapu Lele as well. So my opponent then brings in Arcanine, which is now on full health, and gets the Intimidate off of me. I have Crocodile in. Now, in a previous game, my Crocodile's Tectonic Rage actually managed to one-shot my opponent's Arcanine through Intimidate, which was pretty awesome. So this time I was like, I'm going to do the same thing again, Tectonic Rage on Arcanine. And he protects. So my Tectonic Rage does pretty much nothing, Tapu Lele is able to Moonblast Crocodile to death, and the game goes downhill from me for there. What I should have done was, I should have realized that he knew from earlier that I could do that I could 1 KO him through Intimidate, and I should have predicted that Protect. If I'd crunched the Tapu Lele, that would have KO'd it, picked up a Moxie boost, reset my Intimidate, Arcanine with no Protect would have been vulnerable next turn to be Tectonic Rage, and I probably could have won that. So that was a shame, but that was close. 1 complete wipe, 1 slaughter in my favor, and 1 very close 3-game match. That's actually kind of satisfying for me. So, at this point, in fact, even during Game 3, this is the point where I was starting to feel kind of delirious. My vision was getting a bit blurry, I was feeling a bit feverish from the sickness, my throat was sore. I felt like I don't think I'll be able to play much longer than this. But I felt like, okay, I want to do 1 more game. Because if I win Game 4, then I'll actually be 50-50. And if I quit when I'm 50-50, that's at least an okay performance. You know, I just wanted to give myself a chance to pull out of the negative record. So, I go into Game 4. And guess what? I managed to take both games, and thus putting myself up to 50-50. So I feel like this is actually not a bad way to leave things. 2 wins, 2 losses, but in terms of raw games, I'm sitting at 5 wins, 4 losses. And that actually puts me at exactly the same amount of wins-losses as I had last Nationals that I went to in 2014, because those were best of 1, not 3. So, effectively, I equaled my previous record. I made sure to tell the tournament organisers that I was dropping out, just so that people would know. I actually felt a bit bad for beating my opponent in round 4, because he was clearly very, I hate to say this term, but salty at that point. Whenever I did a good play on him, he always just threw his pen down in frustration and was kind of banging the desk, and it looked like he was about to swear up a storm but couldn't because of the venue. Clearly he wasn't having a very good day, and it always feels bad when you beat people like that. Others who I talked to at the tournament are saying that once you get to those rounds, you're getting to the point where if people lose more, they're pretty much out of the running. So you're basically crushing people's dreams if you beat them, which is what happened. So again, I feel kind of bad about that, but I wonder if that person actually did get a win from me quitting. They might have, so at least I brightened their day in that way. All in all, I felt relatively satisfied with how I did. I know that it sounds weird to be satisfied with only a 50-50 record, but I enjoyed how my team performed. I didn't regret bringing any individual team member, except maybe Celesteela. I felt like my Celesteela didn't actually contribute very much overall. It contributed a lot in some of my online practice battles, but in the actual tournament, not so much, and I was always constantly afraid of Celesteela versus Celesteela mirror matches, which if you've seen the anime, it's basically the Metapod versus Metapod from an early episode, except even worse. Yeah, it totally shut down most Garchomps with Wide Guard. I'm surprised how many Garchomps just get wrecked by Wide Guard. But I feel like maybe a different Wide Guard user would serve my team better in the long run, so Celesteela might be a consideration for dropping from this team in the future. Other than that though, I really like my team. I thought Crocodile did well, which surprised me because I didn't expect Moxie to do well. Xurkitree worked well, both in and out of Tailwind. Whimsicott was the real MVP. She was the real standout. Arcanine did well too. I like this team overall, and I'll probably be using it a bit more in the future. So, given the nature of this tournament, that it's a tethered one, you're not actually able to save battle videos. All you can do is replay the last battle that it's got saved, which is done for the purposes of judges. This was the same as the 2014 tournament, but I thought that I'd do the same thing that I did there. I'd record off of my phone camera the final match that I had still saved in the thing, and I'll show that now, just in case you want to see just what one of my matches looked like. So, this was Game 2 of Round 4. I'd already won Game 1, so I just needed this to win the whole match. So, let's roll the footage. Okay, so I'm actually going to... The video is a bit blurry for the first few moments. It fixes itself eventually. And I apologize if the camera is a bit shaky, but, yeah, I had to hold this up in front of my 3DS. So anyway, so I'm leading with Arcanine and Whimsicott here. They're leading with their Arcanine and an Alolan Muck. They get their Intimidate off, and that means that they're probably faster than my Arcanine. Either that or we're speed tied. So, yeah, it's always good to keep track of what order that abilities activate in, because sometimes that can help with figuring out stuff. I'm pretty sure this Arcanine is actually faster than mine, though. Anyway, I protect Whimsicott because obviously that Muck is going to be, yeah, threatening me. Arcanine Wild Charges into mine instead of Flare Blitzing into Whimsicott, and possibly predicting a Protect there. I go for my own Flare Blitz. I'm pretty sure I should be going to Mucky. Yeah, I'm going to the Muck. Muck is pretty bulky, so it takes that like a champ. Take a bit of recoil damage, and naturally they Poison Jab into Whimsicott here. So this turn, I go for the Tailwind, and this pretty much sacrifices Whimsicott, or at least that's what I thought it would be doing, because Muck is probably going to hit me now. Arcanine is still Wild Charging mine. I'm getting a little low on HP though, and yep, I am actually, okay, so I'm going for the Fire-type Z move on the Muck here, wanting to take this out before it gets a chance to KO Whimsicott. So I tested this out. I know that this actually sometimes leaves Muck from full health in Figgy Berry range, or whatever berry they're using. It's not quite 100% one at KO, but from this amount of HP, I'm pretty confident that it's a KO. So there goes Muck. That was actually pretty good for me because I managed to save Whimsicott there. Don't know why the Arcanine didn't just Flare Blitz her though. So Garchomp's out here. I'm kind of worried about this because without Misty Terrain, I'm not really going to be able to do much to Arcanine with the Whimsicott, so I switch out Crocodile. Now this, okay, this, I feel like this was play of the game for me right here. I Encore Arcanine into Wild Charge. Also, the Garchomp just Poison Jabs, actually onto Crocodile, obviously. So, takes that, and the Arcanine is forced to Wild Charge into Whimsicott due to my Encore, not being able to Flare Blitz. So normally you only think about encoring non-attacking moves, but encoring attacking moves can sometimes lead to some really good stuff. So he's forced to switch out his Arcanine because it's pretty much useless. He has to go into Tapu Fini here, and with this I'm like, congratulations, you just doomed your Garchomp. Because now I actually have a priority Moonblast that I can hit it with. So I'm actually not worried about that Garchomp at all now, which is pretty cool. Also, I'm Earthquaking, protecting with Whimsicott here, getting a little bit of damage on both of them here. So, yeah, I really like that move that I did with the Encore onto Arcanine, because, yeah, that did quite a lot here, and of course Whimsicott blocks that. So, this turn, and yeah, I knew this thing was leftovers from an earlier game. Pretty standard defensive Tapu Fini, I'm pretty sure. So, what we see here is, yeah, I'm going to get my priority Nature Power off, and that Garchomp does not protect, so it's pretty much gone to this. I didn't even need to use the Z move here. In fact, well, I mean, I couldn't, but yeah. Comfortable KO on that Garchomp there, so I felt pretty confident at this point. Now, I am hitting my own Whimsicott with Earthquake here a little bit. I felt it was still alright, because, yeah, I wanted to do that damage to the Tapu Fini, and it is Moonblasting, probably Crocodile. Crocodile didn't really get to do all that much in this fight, but it was a decent enough of a switch-in option, and it did do some alright damage to that Tapu Fini before it went down. So, not a totally useless Pokemon to bring to this one. So, anyway, I have lost Tailwind, but Whimsicott is still in play. I bring Arcanine out, quite heavily weakened. Sorry about that shakiness. And he also brings his Arcanine out. Once again, we'll be seeing... So, his Infinite going off first twice, I'm pretty sure, yeah, his Arcanine is definitely faster than mine. There's no way we're speed tied at this rate. So, yeah, mine went for more HP EVs. Lowering that Arcanine's attack might be okay of an option, but... Anyway, I'm going to put that Tailwind back up, even though I'm probably going to lose Whimsicott this turn. I don't really care at this point. I pretty much got this in the bag. So you're going to be Flare Blitzing, finally, that Whimsicott, and that's going to do a considerable amount of recoil damage to you, so I'm fine with that. Now, what does my own Arcanine do? I forget exactly what it does. It could actually just get... okay, I Wild Charge... into the other Arcanine, not into the Tapu Fini for some strange reason. But I just wanted to, I think what I wanted to do here is, I wanted to make sure that, okay, so I go down to Skull. That was going to happen anyway, but I do have one Pokemon left in the wings. And guess who that one Pokemon is? And guess who has Tailwind up? So, this should be pretty much fine, even with Tapu Fini recovering a little bit here. You'll see for a moment, yes, it is in fact Xurkitree. What I think I wanted to do here was, I wanted to make sure that Arcanine was in discharge KO range for Xurkitree, because if I hadn't Wild Charged it, there is the possibility that maybe I could have carried the Tapu Fini with Wild Charge and then Thunderbolt with the Arcanine, but still, like, Arcanine can be quite bulky, but anyway, I carried both of them at once with the Discharge, and that seals the game for me. So, that was a pretty alright match overall to me. I especially like that Encore move. So I felt that was a pretty decent game overall. My opponent did say that I played well at the end of it, and I thought I played pretty decently. I mean, looking back, there are some things I could have done differently, but it went pretty well overall.